Okay, let's do some housekeeping while we're waiting for everybody else to pop in. We got a good crowd here so far. So good Tuesday to everyone. Welcome to our webinar on AI at scale with Microsoft 365. My name is Rob Husted, and I'm a director at CompuNet, and I'm responsible for our overall partnership with Microsoft. And I'm privileged to be your host today. Before we get started, I just want to make sure everybody understands we're recording today. And so a link to the recording will be sent out to you at the email address that you used to register for the session. So we'll get that out to you here, probably by tomorrow. No problem there. So you'll get that access. We've got the chat feature disabled during the webinar, but we do welcome questions. So if you need any assistance, please use the Q&A feature built into Teams. We'll moderate that during the session, and then we'll address questions throughout as we can, and then at the end if we've still got some time. We'll also, for the presentation deck, we'll make sure that's available to you after the webinar as well. So we'll send out the recording, but we'll also send out a copy of the presentation so that you have that for reference moving forward. And for those of you who might be new to CompuNet, just real fast, we're since our founding in 1998, we've been a leading US-based systems integrator and technology reseller. At CompuNet, we don't just offer IT solutions. We deliver a partnership driven by innovation and customer centricity. We try and make this our relationship all about you, and really work together to make sure you're striving, you're receiving the greatest outcome possible. We do have a strategic partnership with Microsoft that allows us to remain at the cutting edge of their technology and programs, helping ensure you maximize your Microsoft investments. Your presenters today, let's move on. Your presenters today are all CompuNet industry specialists that help organizations of all type plan, deploy, and adopt Microsoft AI and security solutions. John Brune is one of our senior licensing specialists. Blaine Cortez and Nathan Dunlap are in our engineering team that is focusing on AI transformation. And Brandon Edwards is our cloud security architect. So let's quickly review the agenda for today. We'll start by looking at how Microsoft has structured the new E7 bundle from a licensing perspective. We'll then move into a discussion on how agents can transform your day-to-day work, and then finish everything off with a discussion on AI security governance and readiness, and how the new Agent 365 fits into that. And then we'll use the remaining time to answer as many questions as we can. We hope you enjoy the session, and now I will pass it over to John Brune to dive into E7. John.
Thanks, Rob. And appreciate the introduction. Appreciate everybody taking the time today. As Rob mentioned, for better or for worse, I live in the world of Microsoft licensing, contracts, and everything that ties into that. I had a colleague once who used the term, by the mantra, eating the frog, which meant you come in every day and you do the least desirable thing first, and covering the licensing, I guess you could argue, is that in the world of Microsoft. So what I want to do is take you through just, what the packaging is of the E7, what's included in there, just at a high level, and then we'll talk about the licensing of Agent 365 in particular, because it is unique. Rob, can we jump to the next slide, please? So, at a high level, I'm not going to go all the way back into, what all the suites are. I'm kind of starting this from the E5 level. It's been around long enough. Most folks are familiar with that. But when we're looking at the E7, what we're doing is we're adding in the Entra suite, Copilot 365, as well as Agent 365. This is all grounded in Work IQ, which you'll see Work IQ. I don't think it's used a lot in this presentation, but you see it around a lot in the context of Microsoft. And all that really means is it's grounded in your work data. It's context aware, has personalized memory. Just an anecdotal story. When I first got Copilot 365, I answer licensing questions, all day, every day. I answered one for a customer via email. And I was like, I'm 99.9% sure I'm right, that I got that right. But let's ask Copilot. So I asked Copilot, and it gave me the exact same answer. And then I clicked the little source, and it took me to the email that I just sent. So it's good to be aware of where your work is grounded in. When we're talking with the paid services, that's grounded in your tenant business information, and that's what WorkIQ really references. Next slide, Rob, please. So this is just another version of or another way of looking at it. This is how I think of these suites built out. Is okay, what are the individual components that it's made up of? So as I mentioned, we have the E5, which has been around for many years. Kind of in the Entra suite is the next piece, and I would just say, historically, I guess since Agent 365 and Copilot are getting, most of the fanfare or most of the marketing in this, it's kind of assumed that, okay, Entra Suite may not have a huge amount of value. Sometimes Microsoft just throws things into a suite, because they don't know what else to do with it. I would argue Entra Suite isn't the case there. It has a lot of key functionality for traditional user identity management. The core components that make it up, Entra Private Access, which is a zero trust alternative to VPN. This is one that we get a lot of questions about. A lot of organizations are looking at, and I think can be really useful for organizations looking to get rid of that old kind of monolithic VPN solution they have in place. Has Entra ID governance, which is secure access gateway for SaaS apps. Entra Internet ID is a secure gateway for SaaS apps. Entra ID governance extends what you might have in Entra ID P2 with more thorough and entitlement management, access reviews, and most importantly, lifecycle workflows, which is a interesting way to automate the lifecycle process of identities. When users join, leave, change roles within the organization, it can integrate into your HR system, such as Workday, and automate a lot of those change in roles and access levels. Also includes Entra ID protection, which automates detection, investigation, remediation based threats. And Entra Verified ID, which is a little bit unique, is a decentralized identity service that allows user-owned digital identities. So that one's pretty interesting. So just don't, when we talk through this, the Agent 365 and Copilot get a lot of the focus, but Entra ID or Entra Suite does include a lot of value when we're looking at the E7. So don't disregard those that functionality. Obviously, M365 Copilot is the next piece. Again, I think a lot of organizations or a lot of people are very familiar with what this is, but just to lay the groundwork and differentiate that from the free chat, the M365 Copilot includes that grounding in work data. It's built in directly to the Office applications. Now, more and more, the free chat is also kind of being rolled into those applications too, but the key difference is with the paid M365 Copilot, it will actually allow you to rewrite or reconfigure, or reformat your documents where the chat won't do that. And then the third, there's many different differences, but these are just kind of what I feel are the main differentiators between the free and paid version. Is with M365 Copilot, you can use Copilot Studio agents without consuming or without incurring those consumption costs that a user who isn't licensed would. And then finally, Agent 365, we'll talk in detail about this, but just at a general high level, this is Microsoft's new control plane for governance, security management of AI. So that includes central registry inventory, identity access control, security and runtime protection through Defender extension, and Microsoft compliance and governance, such as DLP being extended into those agents. And of course, observability and analytics. So, Rob, let's go to the next slide, please. So me being a licensing guy, a lot of the way I think about this is, and this is just the world that Microsoft has built for us, is, okay, we are invested in this suite. We're slowly adding on components, or, as we evaluate, we say, okay, Copilot's a need to have, Entra's a need to have. At what point do we hit that threshold where the suite starts making sense in the context of the E7 bundle? And this is not taking into account, any promos that are out there. But if you were to buy all those components individually, as you can guess, the suite is going to be less expensive. So just looking at list cost, it's about 15% less. If you're looking at, it's essentially just a basic math equation. As engineering is having conversations with you, and you decide, what is a need to have, or what am I already invested in. The way I'm looking at this is, okay, what does that translate to financially? And have we hit that point where it's just a little bit more to invest in the suite, or maybe we've already hit that threshold? So this is essentially how that math works, just looking at the individual components. Next slide, please, Rob. This is very much a generalization. So what I just wanted to make clear was, okay, for where does it make financial sense? Forgetting about, let's assume you've already evaluated the technology, and you've either invested in or decided, these features or functionality are necessary for the organization. Where does it make sense? If you're already an E5 plus Copilot customer, if you pay just a few dollars more, I think it's $8 more, you get Agent 365 and Entra Suite. It just probably makes fiscal sense to pay just a little bit more. Obviously, if you're E5 Copilot Entra Suite, then it makes sense outright. And then for organizations that are really rolling out agents at scale and have identified the need for governance of those AI agents, then it can make a lot of sense, because you're getting the Copilot plus the Agent 365 governance piece. Where it may not make sense is, if AI adoption is sparse at the moment. Obviously investing in a big, expensive suite can leave you with a lot of shelfware. So maybe, it's not the right time. Where it may also, I don't want to say it doesn't make sense, but maybe not organization-wide, is if you don't have a homogeneous organization and only a subset of users are going to be using AI agents, then maybe an organization-wide investment doesn't make sense. And I will just note, we don't want to put the cart before the horse. If you don't have information and data governance in place yet, maybe it makes sense to look at that before going all the way in on agents and the governance around that. So very much a generalization, but kind of where, from a financial licensing standpoint, it makes sense or doesn't make sense. Next slide, Rob. Switching over to the licensing, and this is an interesting one, because it's a new, I don't want to say new, user-based. So Agent 365 is user-based. I think there were some questions prior. Was it going to be licensed by the individual agent that we have out there, or at the user level? It is by the user level, and I'll get into that a little bit more in the next couple slides. But from a prerequisite perspective, initially, Microsoft came out and said only E5 customers can license Agent 365, and then they backtracked and said, okay, E3 users can add Agent 365, but they're going to have less functionality. Where we've landed today is you either need the E5 or you need the E3 plus the Defender suite plus the Purview suite. So essentially, that's the E3 plus those suites is essentially the E5, SANS, Teams Phone, and Power BI. So it's pretty close to the E5 anyways. The same concept applies to the frontline suites and the SMB business premium suites. You know, if you have a F3, you need the Defender suite plus Purview suite add-on. Same with the business premium, and same logic applies to academic organizations. In the, you know, if you're investing in the A3, you do need the Defender or Purview suite stacked on top of that as a prerequisite to use Agent 365. And that's how it is today. It may change in the future, but it seems like the dust has settled a bit on what the prerequisites are. Next slide, Rob. All right, so this is the fun part. Microsoft has published essentially licensing principles, 4 licensing principles about licensing Agent 365. I'm not going to go through all the wording, but I did include some of the language, but I just want to interpret what this means in practice. So first of all, as I mentioned, Agent 365 is licensed by user. So a user who interacts with any agent that's managed with Agent 365 and using those premium features does need a license. Right now, I think a lot of organizations are trying to understand what agents in their environment is going to look like. So this becomes a little bit of a tricky conversation. It's, you know, in the licensing world, we don't like gray area. We like, you know, the black and white, and, you know, not exactly understanding who's going to be using AI agents, how many agents. It makes this a little bit tricky, and very often, you know, a conversation required talking about your specific situation and what that means. I use this term a lot in the context of Microsoft, but in my opinion, this is kind of the least worst way to do it, is to license by user, because presumably the trajectory that we're going is there's going to be a lot of agents out in every organization. So licensing by agent is probably going to prevent new agent adoption or make you think a little bit harder about that. If you license everybody in the organization with Agent 365, you don't need to worry about you know, that agent sprawl. Second tenet is this is contractually enforced. So if you're familiar with some of the E5 functionality, if you add one E5 license into your tenant, all of a sudden it lights up some functionality that all of a sudden everybody, quote unquote, benefits from. It's up to you as the organization to either limit users who are not licensed for that functionality to not benefit from that service. So again, one of the things that is Achilles heel to licensing are these subjective words used in the licensing language. The reality is that's just how Agent 365 is licensed. It becomes, again, tricky because it's hard to understand, you know, who's going to be touching these agents, who needs to be licensed ahead of time. As that kind of evolves, I think there will be kind of norms within organizations. You know, the reality is for a lot of organizations, it's going to mean just licensing, you know, everybody. And multiplexing applies. So all that means is you can't get around the licensing rules by having everybody just share one user login to benefit from that agent or use that agent. All of those users still need to be licensed. Third and fourth are just you know, basic comments about the functionality. Users, unlicensed users, you still get some basic visibility into the agents. You can keep an agent inventory, basic usage insights, visibility to permissions access, and basic governance. So block, allow, delete, approve, assign. All of that functionality is included for free for just any Office 365 user. And then the fourth is, this is just a comment on that Agent 365 is intended to manage both Microsoft agents and third-party agents. All this is saying is Microsoft can't always control the level of access they have to third-party agents. So I just want to make it clear that there may be some agents out there that aren't open enough for them to have as much visibility. So the feature availability across third-party agents may vary, and it's hard to know from agent to agent what that's going to look like. So again, clear as mud. I would say it's worth a conversation about your specific environment or what you have planned for agents to understand how the licensing affects you. Yeah, and this is a bit of a moving target. Things may change, things may clarify, or things might be clarified as we go along. It's a newer license model, so that's not uncommon for things to get clarified as we go along a little bit. And next slide, Rob. All right. Finally, I just wanted to touch on some of the common questions that we get. Do you need E5 to access Agent 365? I already answered that. Not necessarily, but you're almost investing in that E5 level suite. I guess where this is especially relevant is with Business Premium and SMB. You can add on the Purview suite and the Defender suite. So as it sits right now, you don't necessarily need E5 or E5 level. Is Copilot co-work? This has been a big question. Is Copilot co-work included in the M365 Copilot? No, but it is a prerequisite. So the way co-work is licensed is you need the M365 license. The user needs that to be able to use co-work, but then the co-work functionality is usage-based or consumption-based, and it consumes what Microsoft calls Copilot credits, what everybody else calls tokens. So there is an incremental cost on top of just the M365 Copilot license, but that is a requirement. And finally, does everybody in my organization need Agent 365? I think what Microsoft is trying to say is yes, but there are situations where not everybody needs Agent 365. You don't have a homogeneous environment. Say you're a retail store and retail workers are never going to use agents, or you're only investing in agents in the corporate side, the non-retail workers. Maybe those are two very different environments, and you can segregate them, and you only have to license the folks in the corporate office because that's where your agents exist. I do think it can be hard to understand what your agent usage is going to look like in your environment long term. So in a lot of situations, it is going to mean everybody in that organization, because how do you know who's going to be using this agent? How do you prevent that? So the least satisfying answer to this is it depends. And that's again, I would welcome any conversations to talk about your specific situation. Finally, last thing I just wanted to say is with anything Copilot related right now, Microsoft does have a lot of promos going. I'm not going to get into the nuance of that, but just know if your organization is making investments into Copilot, there's probably a promotion that exists. And there's also probably funding, even if it's tangentially related. Maybe it's information protection governance project to get ready for Copilot. There's often funding that we can utilize. And so, again, happy to have that conversation in tandem with the licensing conversation. But that's the high level, and we'll get to the more exciting stuff as far as the functionality within this technology. And Rob, back to you, sir.
Thanks, John. Yeah, some really good points there at the end. So we are in Microsoft's new fiscal year 27. Their year starts on July 1st. And so we're a couple weeks into all the new programs. And so if you talked to us in the past or talked to Microsoft about various funding programs, it's all brand new now. and maybe you didn't qualify for things before, or maybe you used up programs before. It's all refreshed, so it's worth talking to you, talking to your Microsoft team if you have one. Talk to your company account executive or the engineers here that you work with, and just ask them, hey, is based on the new programs and where we're trying to go next with this, are there programs that apply, right? And we're also taking the time to educate internally here at CompuNet to make sure our sales teams, our engineering teams, and our overlay teams all understand the new programs, so they can also do look that up for you in advance and help you understand. So, okay, now that we understand the components of E7, what makes it up, let's dig into some agent topics here with Blaine. So Blaine, I will hand it over to you.
Hey everyone, Blaine Cortez here. I'm seeing a lot of familiar names in the chat there, so good to see those of you again. All right, I want to shift gears for the next little while and talk about the piece that gets people either really excited or a little nervous, right? Agents. And just to be upfront, right, when folks hear AI agent, the first thing they think is this coming for my job? So we're going to tackle that head on. My goal is by the end of this, you'll see that agents are for what they actually are, a way to take the repetitive, draining parts of your work off your plate so you can spend your time on the stuff that actually needs a human, right? So let's dig in. Quick roadmap for my portion. First, we'll level set on what an agent actually is, because the word gets thrown around a lot. And then the big mental model, the difference between Copilot chat and a Copilot agent. We'll pop the hood for a minute and look into how one's actually built. Nothing too technical, right? Just the moving parts. And then the fun stuff. 3 real customers, 3 real problems, and what changed. And yes, we'll answer the is this taking my job question, honestly, not with a sales pitch. All right, let's go. So what is an agent? Simplest way I can put it. A chatbot that answers a question. An agent completes a task. Under the hood, an agent is just an AI model that's been given 4 things. A job to do, the knowledge to do it, permission to actually take action, and guardrails, so it stays in its lane. That word agentic you keep hearing, it just means that AI can reason through a few steps and act on them, instead of waiting for you to prompt every single move. Think of the difference between an assistant who answers when you ask versus one who sees the same request for the 100th time and just handles it the way you want it to. That's the leap we're looking at here. So this is kind of something that you can put on the post-it note on your desk, right? Tattoo it to the back of your hand if you want. Copilot chat helps a person get work done. It's you in the moment asking for a summary or a draft. It's personal, it's one-off, and you're driving. An agent helps a process get work done consistently, repeatedly, and the same way for everyone, whether you're at your desk or on a beach. Chat is the power tool you pick up. An agent is more like a machine you set up once and it runs. Neither replaces the other. Most teams end up using both, right? So chat for the creative in the moment stuff, agents for the repetitive stuff that can happen the same way every time. I like to use the analogy of the difference between a stick shift and a automatic, right? Let's pop the hood for a second. This really demystifies this whole agent thing, right? So every agent is really just 5 building blocks. You've got your instructions, which is the persona and rules. Basically, here's your job and here's how to behave. And then you have your knowledge, which also you might hear the word grounding. So you would point this at your trusted sources, right? Maybe your internal policies, frequently asked questions, documentation. So it answers from your truth and not just the open internet. And then you have orchestration, right? Or topics. This is actually your conversational behavior is the way I like to look at it, right? So you have your trigger, your asks, answer outputs, what sets it off and how it responds, right? Then you have actions. This is where really agents can become really powerful. It can actually do things like for you, right? Like kick off a Power Automate workflow, open a ticket using a connector, fill out a form, and then you have your guardrails and escalation, right? So scoped access, a clean, I don't know, let me get a human, and a handoff path. That's it. Not necessarily any magic there. So a quick reality check. This isn't a science project that needs a team of data scientists. There are two front doors. So you've probably seen this in your Copilot M365 desktop app. If you're a regular user, Agent Builder lets you spin up a simple task-focused agent right inside a Copilot in plain language. So you're not necessarily building in that conversational behavior so much as you're allowing it to kind of direct itself. If you're in IT or you're a pro maker, Copilot Studio is the grown-up version, right? This is where you kind of get more technical. Deterministic workflows, 1,400 plus connectors into the tools you already run, and full security and governance. Same idea, 2 levels of horsepower. The barrier to entry is low. So why would you actually build one, right? 3 big reasons: efficiency, consistency, and scale. It takes the high volume repetitive tasks and just handles them. So your people aren't doing the same thing 200 times a week, right? From the consistency front, it answers the same way every time around the clock. No more Monday morning versus Friday afternoon variants. And then you have scale. When demand spikes, you don't scramble to add headcount. The agent absorbs it. And here's the part that should put IT and security at ease, right? So because it's grounded in your approved sources and governed by your existing permissions, you get all of that without it going rogue. So you get speed, consistency, and scale, but you get that safely. So the elephant in the room, right? Is this going to take my job? Here's the honest take. Agents are really good at repetitive, rule-based, high-volume stuff. The parts of your job you'd honestly be thrilled to hand off. What they're not good at is judgment, context, relationships, and the weird edge cases. The stuff that actually makes your job yours. So the way to frame it is agents don't replace people. They retire parts of the job nobody got into this career to do in the first place. Every customer story I'm about to show you follows the same arc. A person got handed hours of their week back, and they moved up to work that was more valuable and frankly more interesting. The agent takes those boring, repetitive tasks, and you keep the judgment. And if you're wondering whether or not this is just hype, it's not. 90% of Fortune 500 are already using M365 Copilot. Lumen is saving its sellers about 4 hours a week. That's $50 million a year. PwC rolled it out across 136 countries for $150 million in time savings. Estee Lauder built an agent to turn messy data into real-time intelligence. The through line in every one of these, people got time back to do better work. Now here's what it looked like for 3 of CompuNet's customers. So for every story, I'll walk through the same 4 beats, right? The background, the problem they were stuck with, and how we actually design the agent, and the business outcome. So for the first example, an internal policy assistant. Picture an employee whose day got hijacked by the same question over and over. This person was go-to for internal questions, the human search engine for the company. The problem, every single day, a flood of emails and chats. How much PTO do I have? What's the payroll cutoff? Where's that policy? Which form do I use? All that's reactive, repetitive, things that are happening every day, and you're just never done with it, right? So we help them build an internal policy assistant, grounded in their HR, payroll, PTO, and internal documentation. It answers employees in plain language, right in the flow of work, and points them to the source. And because of that, the entire reactive queue is basically non-existent. They've completely put that part of their job behind them and moved on to work that actually moves the needle, right? Same person, way better day. Human in the loop. An application review agent. This one kind of hits close to heart. It's a really awesome little situation. This is an organization that serves families in need of assistance. Every year they run an eligibility program, and here's the problem, right? So Staff manually screened through hundreds of applications by hand to figure out who needed the most help right now. That process took them roughly 8 months out of the year. And on top of that, 6 employees, 8 months. So we built an application review agent with them. We encoded their acceptance criteria and their parameters, and the agent screens and narrows down the pile, right, to the most qualified applicants. And the human still makes the final call. The agent does the sorting, the people do the deciding. That 8-month grind dropped to a matter of weeks, and those staff got redirected to actually serving families instead of shuffling paper. Kind of cool. Then we have one that kind of resonates, I think, with the larger crowd, right? The classic one everybody can relate to. The IT help desk. So a support team is buried under tickets. A huge chunk of what hits a help desk is level 1. The same password reset, sync issues, how do I stuff, over and over and over. They stood up a level 1 help desk agent. It talks to the end user, troubleshoots using their grounded frequently asked question documents, online help articles. And here's the cool part. If it can't solve it, it doesn't just dead end. It escalates to a tier 2 human to carry on, and it automatically opens a ticket in their ticketing system so nothing falls through the cracks. Users get instant help on the easy stuff. The humans focus on the genuinely hard tickets, and everything's tracked. That's actions plus escalation plus human in the loop, all working together. So let's step back and look at all 3 of those, right? Same recipe every time. They started with a task that was repetitive, high volume, and rule-based. The perfect thing to hand off. They grounded the agent in trusted sources so the answers are theirs and not the internet's. They kept a human in the loop for the judgment calls and the edge cases. In every case, people moved up to a higher value work. That's the whole playbook. Agents take the load off, people keep the judgment. If you remember one line from this, that's what you want to take with you. Okay, so now you're saying, how do we actually start, right? So you really need to lay out these steps. You need to make a plan, right? So you need to pick your users, your top handful of questions or tasks, how you'll measure success, and your escalation path. Then you'll add your knowledge, so you'll connect trusted sources, and then define behavior, how it responds to each intent and conversation, right? And then publish it where people can actually see it. Teams, SharePoint, even a public website is a publishing channel. Wherever they work, people, because an agent nobody sees doesn't help anyone. And then monitor and iterate, right? Watch it, tune it, improve it. Don't boil the ocean. Pick one high value, low risk use case, a policy Q&A, a request intake, and those are easy wins, right? Measure the time you save and build from there. So agents aren't here to replace you. They're here to work alongside you and take the stuff off your plate that was never the best use of your time. So AI is here to work, right? Start small, keep a human in the loop, and let it give you your week back. So this is the portion where we kind of go into more of the lifecycle management aspects of Copilot Studio, right? When we talk about Copilot agents, the common mistake is thinking that work ends when the agent is created. In reality, that's when responsibility begins. Microsoft defines application lifecycle management as the people, process, and tools that govern an agent from idea through development, testing, deployment, and eventual decommissioning one day. Building well starts with 3 decisions, right? Who's going to own it, what business problem it solves, and what data and actions it's allowed to touch. In Copilot Studio, you author the instructions, topics, triggers, knowledge sources, and tools, as we kind of went over there. And critically, every agent is created inside a Power Platform solution. So if you're familiar with the Power Platform, you probably have heard that term before, which is the container that lets you move it across environments later. Set your build standards up front. Grounding, graceful fallback, human in the loop, responsible AI behavior, and early test sets so you can evaluate quality automatically as the agent evolves. Deployment is where discipline pays off, right? Microsoft's healthy baseline is 3 environments. You've got your development environment, test environment, and production environment. Or you've probably heard the term dev. With the dev and test as sandbox types and production configured as production type environment, each locked down with an intra-security group. You promote agents by moving solutions, ideally through Power Platform pipelines, Azure DevOps, or GitHub, and you export, deploy as managed everywhere except your dev environment. Keep configurations portable with environment variables for settings and connection references for credentials, and turn on Git integration for source control. Add a quality gate, right? Automated tests run can pause a deployment and only continue if the agent passes. And then finally, remember that Copilot Studio items aren't solution aware. Application insight settings, manual authentication, direct line web channel security, deploy channels, and sharing, those need post-deployment steps on the downstream environment. All right, and then touching on governance here. Governance is the finish line that makes scale safe, right? 2 things work together. First, the Copilot control system gives you management controls, the agent lifecycle from deployment to retirement, connector enabled block, sharing and co-authoring limits, DLP policies that can block publishing channels, a lifecycle approval workflow for production, and second, the Power Platform Center of Excellence, anchored by the COE Starter Kit. This gives you an inventory of every app, flow, and agent with owner, last modified date, connector usage, and business justification, plus environment governance and maker nurture components. Layer monitoring on top. So you have usage, quality, cost, feedback, and stale or orphan assets using Copilot Analytics and the Admin Center reporting services. The key message for customers, right? Because Copilot Studio is part of the Power Platform, you don't need a brand new governance universe for the agents. You extend the COE you already have with agent-specific lifecycle, security, responsible AI review, and monitoring. And I think that is time to kick it over to, or I guess back to Rob.
Thanks so much, Blaine. Appreciate it. What a great discussion. So just a reminder, as we get closer to the end of this, the Q&A section is there for you all. If you've got questions, post them in there and we'll make sure we're addressing those here at the end. We just have one more section left. So we looked at the components of the E7 licensing bundle, and now we've taken a really close look at AI agents. I'm sure every one of you on here has been experimenting with other types of AI tools, chats, etc. These are all very powerful. They have access to an awful lot of information. And so it always comes back to how we structure this properly to maintain security and governance. So as we get into readiness, we're going to pass it over to Brandon Edwards, and he's going to jump through the rest of the discussion. Brandon, are you out there?
I am out there. Can you guys hear me okay?
Sounded good, Brandon.
Excellent. So you guys may have all seen this here. This is the Microsoft Copilot path. So when a user makes an initiation on a prompt to do something, to research something, to retrieve something, to do work with it, this is a process that it goes through. The next step that I did on top of this is, where do we start adding some data governance and some controls to allow the productivity increase of Copilot, but also putting in the right governance, content hygiene, and risk management as users are gaining access to data, being able to manipulate it, and they're doing this at a scale and speed that has not been achieved before without these large language models. So real quick, what I want to show you here is where do we start putting controls into the Copilot environment? Right out the gate, as we were talking through this stuff, we're looking at role-based access control, least privileged, MFA, conditional access policies. This is saying, hey, who can have access to the tenant? What can they get access to? And are they the right person? So we're kind of leaning towards zero trust. And this matters towards the E7 suite, because we do have the Entra suite, which has identity governance and a zero trust network access solution where we can have the GSA agent go to all of your endpoints and they can access data in the cloud as well as data on premise, and they have to go through that specific gateway. So right out the front, we're starting with identity. That's the new boundary. That's our new security boundary, is identity. So we want to make sure that we've got everything right here, from privileged identity management, being able to say, hey, this user has privileges. Maybe they have to elevate to a higher privilege, and we want to give them a time limit on how to do that. Copilot responds to all of that from a user perspective. We also have agent identity. As we're moving into this concept of Agent 365 and having agents, they themselves have their own identity. And as I've said, identity is the new boundary. We're going to take that same approach with agents as they get built inside of the environment or they get procured from the outside. You can go to the Microsoft store and say, hey, there's this cool agent. I want to add it to my environment. All right, let's do an evaluation on it. Let's put the right controls in place, like a conditional access policy, to limit what that agent has access to. Same with group membership, intra-governance, access packages, and information barriers. We want to have a good foundation so users cannot get to data that they shouldn't have access to. Back to the licensing, it's good to start thinking about that licensing persona to say, hey, these users who do have access to sensitive information should have more security controls put in place because they can use, move, and manipulate that data. Where if we have a profile of a user who's maybe doing less work dealing with sensitive data, or their work does not involve any kind of sensitive data, we don't necessarily need to license them, but we also need to make sure that they don't have access to all of it. So again, identity, role-based access control, granting people the right access. As we move on through and say, hey, we've got that fundamental stuff taken care of, we start going through the rest of this where we look at data protection and data classification. As we start looking at people building agents, we need to have a good policy in place that says, what kind of data can Copilot have access to? At the end of the day, Copilot and agents are really, really cool applications. So we're going back to the fundamentals here to say, hey, should we be posting our quarterly financial reports on Facebook or a Dropbox or LinkedIn? Probably not. So we should do the same thing with Copilot. We probably shouldn't be allowing people to upload that kind of data to large language models as well. So we want to put in policies in place to say, hey, initially, let's block the things that we know are not sanctioned. So whatever your guys' choice is on your large language model, you can block it, and then ideally, you would say, hey, everyone else we're going to block. Copilot is the one that we're going to use. You can send a certain amount of data to it. And that can be achieved through sensitivity labels, automatic labeling, and classification schemas, where we're saying, hey, based on these classifications, we don't want large language models to process this data. We would add labels to those documents and add encryption and access control, and Copilot and other places where that data can live can't get a hold of that decryption key to decrypt that data to start using it or manipulating it. So we've got some guardrails there. And we move down the lines to data loss prevention policies. We can do that with the Edge browser. That comes into play with that E7 enhancement with the ZTNA product, and the Edge browser becomes an enterprise browser. Also inside of all of this is the governance and monitoring on the far right of the screen there. Inside of Purview, this is a big fundamental difference that I find between Copilot as a large language model and Microsoft's ecosystem, is the ability to track and monitor all of this stuff natively within the platform. From an enterprise level, it becomes different when you start looking at Claude or DeepSeek, name your large language model. But inside of Purview, you can go to AI observability, you can go to the activity explorer, and there's an AI activity button, and you can start looking at all the interactions that your end users have with agents, with Copilot, and if they're logged into Copilot Web, you can get those as well. It shows you the prompt, it shows you the data that the agent or the native Copilot application was retrieving, the websites, the SharePoint sites, the internal work IQ, and then it'll also show you the output that was sent to the end user. Because we have all of that data, when we start looking at Agent 365, which is where we'll move to next, we can start using those advanced tools to say, hey, this looks like insider risk, or hey, they're applying sensitive information to this. This doesn't look right. We can start putting in more governance and more controls to say like, hey, this is acceptable, this is not acceptable. It also helps us understand how users are adopting and using the tool. We can help organizations kind of look at this holistically. If there are fundamental gaps inside of your organization where data management, data security, data governance hasn't been a priority, we can help organizations kind of make that a priority. We can help you build policies and all these other things. Retention labels is important, and help you understand how to use this ecosystem to make your environment more secure without prohibiting productivity and the enablement of Copilot and Copilot agents. So now we're going to take a deeper dive into Copilot agents here in the next 5 minutes. Don't have much time here. So, securing Copilot and agents with DSPM. DSPM will allow us to look at the environment. The first step is to know your data. Then we can protect it, and then prevent data loss, and then repeat. If users have too much access, they're going to start using that data in ways that you guys don't want them to. The heavy hitter here is Microsoft Agent 365. So this is where, as the organization starts getting more agents in the environment, we have to govern those and we have to understand if they're safe. So Agent 365 brings in observability by allowing us to look at the agents that are actively being used in the environment. It allows us to control it. So we can say, hey, these agents are permitted, these agents are not permitted. We have administrative control on that. And we can look at the data that those agents have access to and what those agents' compliance or risk level is based on what Microsoft incorporates in the store. You can also see the agents that are being built inside of your environment. So if you have end users, like Blaine is pointing out, they're going to build their own agents. You can limit the amount that those can be shared. So you can say, hey, only these users can actually build agents, and only these users can actually share agents. And then these are the only people who can receive those shared agents. So we can put in some governance models inside of there to limit what that looks like and limit what those agents are. So you can safely and securely build an agent who you may say, hey, this is sensitive data, but we do want to have some productivity increase here. So that's fine. Let's do it, but let's do it securely and responsibly by putting in the appropriate guardrails around that. So that kind of leaks into that govern side. And then the securing agents, one of the hidden gems inside of all of this is Agent 365 expands the purview capabilities and the Defender for the Defender suite, basically. It's Defender for agents. Microsoft hasn't officially called it that, but that's what it is, out to agents. So if you have an agent, maybe you have a rogue agent, maybe you have a rogue person on staff who's like, hey, I'm going to configure an agent to reach out to a command and control site, or a site that downloads malicious content or content that isn't appropriate for the environment. You have Defender for Endpoint to monitor that, and then you also have Purview to monitor that kind of data, and we can put controls. So you'll start getting, if configured properly, you can have insider risk policies start flagging on malicious data, exfiltration, misuse, and abuse on the Purview side. And then if it's an actual threat like malware, script kiddies, things like that, the Defender side will pick that up and incorporate that in its investigations. And then finally, you also have some controls there with conditional access policies where you can specify, as I said, agents have an identity. You can go to conditional access policies now and pick on those identities and say, hey, you don't have access to this stuff. A very easy conditional access policy to put in place is, no agents inside of my environment should have access to any of the admin APIs, admin MCPs, or anything like that. Obviously, you can make some gaps to allow for your admins to do some cool things, but that leaks us into a security Copilot, which is a powerful tool. So to kind of wrap up with that, E7 brings us the capability of adding Copilot, but then using it responsibly, securely, without inhibiting productivity. With Agent 365, we can put those guardrails on there and make sure that that happens. And then we also have that Zero Trust Network Access product, so we can start governing how those agents go out to the internet and use that data and bring it in, as well as make sure that we have a solid handle on the identity as people come into the environment. Maybe something that not everyone's thinking of is if a user gets compromised and they have a Copilot license and they have a bunch of data, Copilot allows speed and scale at an unprecedented level that we haven't seen before. That means if a bad actor gets a hold of an account that has those tools and that power, they could exfiltrate and do things to your environment at speed and scale using those tools. So again, we want to have that frontline identity protection, but then that insider risk, the Defender product there to protect us. So defense in layers. I've reached 11 a.m., top of the hour there. Rob?
Thanks so much, Brandon. Yeah, I appreciate it. So next step, since we're at time. If you've got individual questions that arose and you want to have some conversations to follow this up, reach out to your CompuNet account executive or any of us on this call or any engineer you work with. We can get that set up. As we mentioned, it's now FY27. There's new programs, new funding vehicles, new incentives and promotions. So great time to ask about all of those topics. We do have a handful of bite-sized assessments that we can go through pretty quickly. This is an example. If you're wanting to dig deeper into agents or Agent 365, if you need demos of anything, if you just want to have your own unique conversation, we can get that scheduled for you guys. So with that, and being respectful of your time, what's next? So we'll send out an update with the link to the recording and the deck. We'll send up follow-up information on anybody that may be interested in doing some sort of a licensing assessment around E7 to better understand where you're at now and how E7 could fit into your roadmap. And then with that, you can just reach back out with any questions whatsoever, and we'll get those addressed. At this point, I really, really appreciate your time. Thank you so much, folks. And we'll go ahead and wrap the session, and we'll see you back on another session like this in the future.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.